And did Judaism come directly out of Yahwism?
It's a great question. So
Isn't that like the consensus, or is that that's the like academic consensus?
That is the consensus, and what I'm actually
what you're pushing back against.
Yahwism. So you're right. Yahwism is seen as kind of proto-Judaism, and it's and people usually argue that by the 2nd century before the Common Era, Yahwism kind of disappears, and we are left with Torah-based Judaism.
When you say before the Common Era, you mean BC?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I don't use BC AD.
Everybody has different things. Every single Bible scholar, they have a different way of doing it, and I'm always confused. So that's why I try to like figure out what you mean up front.
Right.
Because for me, it's just BC AD.
Yeah. And I understand. So I just use these more objective objective terms. So about second century before the Common Era, we have Torah-based Judaism. So Judaism per se, when you really want to talk about actual Judaism, you have to talk about people who are following certain commandments that are written in certain authoritative books, right? So the commandments that are enumerated in the Torah, for example, though observing the Sabbath, et cetera, et cetera. So that Judaism is by definition depends on knowledge of these commandments and observing these commandments. Now we have thousands of documents from different Jewish or Yahwistic, I should say, really. Settlements in various places in the ancient world. So from Egypt, from the southern part of Egypt, as I said, Elephantine, and all the way through northern Egypt and then Palestine and then into Babylonia. Okay. We have thousands of documents, not all of them textual. Some of them are coins, for example, but these are also very important.
Right.
But we really have thousands of documents altogether. But none of these documents betray the slightest knowledge of the Bible. Okay?
They don't betray.
They don't show any, they have no knowledge of the Bible in any of these documents. Okay? I mean, even not, no idiomatic expressions, for example, that
and
we
when you
find
say
in
the Bible, you're talking about the Torah? The
Bible in general.
In general.
But of course, the Torah is the main is the main document that you would expect. But it has absolutely zero. I mean, there's nothing, even the names, the personal names of people, are not the names that we find in the heroes of the Bible, like the 12 tribes, or Moses, or Aaron, or Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. None of the people that are Yahwists in this entire time period, up until the beginning of the Hellenistic period. None of these people are named after literary heroes from the Torah or from the Bible in general, which is fascinating. When you think about this. Now,
so the academic or religious viewpoint or consensus on this is that Judaism started around 1200. Is that right? Or what is the date that like Judaism
started? Talk about academic and religious. These are going to be different things.
Right. Like by and large, what is the idea of when Judaism?
So the religious, I can't talk too much about the religious because there's a lot of different. And I know that there. I mean, like really kind of fundamentalist religious folks would say, well, Judaism started with Abraham, really, right? So it's about 2000 before the Common Era, somewhere like that.
Okay.
And then they'll go forward from that. But
so the earliest people will say is 2000.
Something. I
BC.
mean, yeah. I can't. Again, I can't talk too much about the religious
I'm just
perspective on this, but I think that's what what is said in certain circles. In academia, Judaism, I think now it's pretty much consensus that Judaism as such, meaning people who observe these commandments, such as the Sabbath and the Passover and all these feasts, tabernacles, and et cetera, and kosher diet and all of that.
Follow the rules.
All of these rules, 2nd century before the Common Era, so 2nd century BCE. That's where we start to see people observing this extra biblically.
Okay.
Okay, in the Bible, that's a different story. But from what we start seeing extra-biblically,
Outside the Bible.
outside the Bible, from these primary sources that I talked about earlier, right? We talked about the Ostraka, we talked about the documents that are written by the simple folk. That you know they trade things, they do all kinds of activities on the Sabbath, for example, that are not permitted by the Torah. They do a lot of stuff that goes squarely against what is prescribed in the Torah, prescribed in the Torah. But we don't have anything to show adherence to the Torah. We have a lot of negative examples, but we don't have anything to show that they knew anything about the Torah at all in that time period. So Judaism, from a purely extra-biblical perspective, Judaism starts around the second, maybe late 3rd century before the Common Era.
And if you want to not be extra-biblical, you want to stay inside the Bible, when is it from?
According to the Bible, according to certain interpretations of the Bible, we're talking about Abraham, right, being kind of the founder of the, in the sense of like the covenant with God and things like that. Which, as a scholar, looking at this for a lot of reasons, this is mythological. Okay.
Yes.
And so, and I can say that with certainty in terms of as a scholar.
When was Abraham again?
It was supposed to be about around 2000.
2000. Got it. Got it. Okay.
And but the reason I'm very certain about this is that, first of all, again, we have thousands of documents, and none of them know anything about any of these stories. Nothing. Even the name Abraham doesn't exist anywhere within the sphere of Jewish life or Yahwistic life anywhere. But also the idea, so the whole concept of Abraham and the patriarchs, so Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, is people coming from the East to establish a new nation, right? That's the whole concept of the patriarchs. Coming from the East, and even when Jacob and Isaac need to marry, they have to go back and marry someone from the East and bring them to Canaan. So the idea of people coming from the East and establishing a community is such a deeply Hellenistic idea. So in the Hellenistic world,
when you say Hellenistic idea, what do you mean by that?
Well, in the Hellenistic world, it was really important for a lot of these.
Hellenistic means a certain time frame, right?
Correct. So we're talking really the turn of the 3rd century, late 4th century before the Common Era, and really into the Common Era.
Okay,
that's a much wider, that's kind of Greco-Roman now that we're talking about, but it's still the
Hellenic. 550 BC is as early as it gets, right?
No, about 400.
Oh, 400, okay.
Yeah, about 400.
All right.
Not 400, about 300 and, let's say 320 to be, so the Hellenistic period around, the conquest of Alexander the Great and forward.
Okay.
So about 320-ish, and into the Roman world. The Roman world, we call it Greco-Roman, but it's really still kind of continuing a lot of these Hellenistic sensibilities that they had. Mm-hmm. And so for the Greek world and for the Greco-Roman world, creating the mythology, the founding mythology of your people, whether it's a polis in the Greek world or even Rome, was someone coming from the East, which for them is always the kind of the early, the old world, this mystical world that comes from the East, and establishes their country. So in several polis in Greece had these legends about this mythical founder coming from the East to establish them. And even Rome, at the height of its power, so under Augustus, or one of the heights of its power, under Augustus commissioned Virgil to write the Aeneads, so the mythological story of the founding of Rome, which is about the same size as the Torah, about the same number of verses and words as the Torah. So it's a lengthy work. Now he had it to write it in meter and rhyme, which the Torah authors didn't have to deal with. So it's much harder. What he did is much harder. But he did that, and he also, it's called the Aeneads because after Aeneas, who was this this mythological hero from Homer, from the Trojan War, and so they built this entire idea how he is coming from Troy, so from the east, to establish Rome. Okay, so this idea of someone coming from the east to establish a new race or a new city or a new settlement is something that is deeply Hellenistic, and we see that here. So with the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, these founders coming from the east, that is so in many ways so Hellenistic in its core.
Yes, interesting.
And again, we simply have absolutely zero knowledge anywhere. It's not. These patriarchs. And the names of the matriarchs, either Sarah, Rachel, Leah, etc., are not found in the document record at all. None of the women that are mentioned anywhere in these thousands of documents that we have are named like that, and none of the men are named after these literary heroes from the Bible. So there's simply zero knowledge of the Bible anywhere up until the beginning of the Hellenistic era. So that's why, for these reasons and others, it is certainly clear to me that these things are mythological.